Something which came up on air, and there was a slight disagreement between Shane and Matt, if we could dig into it in a touch. It's not a hindsight argument on your part, Matt. You always felt, the rest week notwithstanding, you always felt it was a gamble, an unprecedented thing to just play all the frontline players against the lesser lights. And that's been Farrell's way, and he stuck to it. And you all seem to remark there was a lack of intensity or a freshness maybe about Ireland this evening. That's going to be a question. I don't know how we answer it definitively, but you had your reservations.
I have my reservations in round one of the pool.
You did, yeah.
Only because every other team in the history of the World Cup that I can find, I did go back and look, and I couldn't find all of them, but I certainly know the Australians and the New Zealanders in the first one, right through. In one of the pool games, the rest of the squad played. They didn't play their best team, all the pool games, and then quarters, semi-final, and lift the trophy.
Yeah.
Right? So, and here, let me say, I have the deepest of respect and admiration for Andy Farrell, and I want to support him in this time where it's really difficult. I don't want to criticise him, I'm not trying to pull him down. But Ireland have played more minutes than any other team in the quarters, and certainly the big four, and certainly more than the Kiwis. And I just didn't think they were at their best tonight. And I'm not saying that's the reason because I can't prove it, but I'm saying it is a discussion.
Yeah, and listen, it's hard to prove the negative, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
it
I suppose the sort of counter to that is actually everyone in the Irish squad, you know, Jimmy O'Brien was the last one, got game time in this World Cup. So it wasn't like they played the full 80 minutes and there was a decent rotation. Now, not as much as any other team, you're dead right. And I think, you know, some of that was Sexton wanting to get game time as well. Maybe some of it not trusting anyone but Sexton to have that game time as well. But slightly different this year than years gone by as well, Matt, where you had, you know, the cadence of the group for Ireland was the two, you know, pretty easy, I'll say, games in the opening couple of weekends. Then South Africa, and it was a crescendo to South Africa. It was 2 weeks then. There was recovery time. Yeah. And yes, there's a Scotland game last week, and listen, it got pretty loose at the end, but you know, it wasn't a complete drain or, you know, energy sapper. And I thought, you know, listen, these guys are, you know, highly trained, you know, ultimate professionals. They'll be looking after the body. They'll be doing all the recoveries, everything that they need to do. Of course. And they will have been doing very little training. You know, it's not, you're pretty, you know, at the end of a competition, you just don't do anything. You're doing captain's run, a few throws here and there. You're doing no conditioning. So I think they're capable. I think they're capable of putting their bodies through it. Could they have gone all the way to the World Cup final and would have made a difference? Yeah, perhaps under those circumstances. But I think for this one, I think they had enough. Now, do we know for sure? We don't. No. But I tell you what we do know for sure was they lacked a little zip tonight. There
was still a luxury in being able to make some substitutes in that Scottish game. I think the key game was the Tonga one. That was the one where we probably would have said, we were all a little bit surprised that he went so strong in that. Now there's an argument because Tonga, no one was really sure where they were at. They had 4 All Blacks brought back into their team that were able to change allegiance after the last World Cup, and we're thinking maybe this Tonga team is a little bit better than we're giving them credit for. As it turned out, they weren't. We would have beaten them with our second choice team, but that was still a big gamble to have taken at the time. The other point worth mentioning is there was the ball and play in that time was a lot. Okay, it was a lot of ball in that game tonight that we just watched. Ireland made, I think, 67 tackles in the first 7 minutes. Okay, wow. So remember, New Zealand came out of the blocks. Yeah. Ireland were under the pump, tackle. That takes it out of you physically. Yeah. Okay, so the game tonight, the type of game it was, also didn't lend itself well to a team who may be starting to tire at some point.
I think in the review, the question will be, in the last warm-up game against Samoa in Bayonne, is that right? Have I got that right? In Bayonne, they played their seconds team. Was that the day you play your first team, give them the week off, don't play them against Romania, and then you get them going? Because, as Shane said, they had to peak or be ready for South Africa. Now, we're talking in... And I said at the time, we'll only know this looking in hindsight.
Yeah.
But I I think it's going to come up in the review.
One of the points was that Ireland didn't go especially well in Bayonne that night.
No.
And maybe Andy Farrell had planned to give more secondary players time against Tonga, but on All Blacks return, and just that was not a great performance. And let's find a bit of form. South Africa around the corner. Maybe there was a change to keep the foot down.
And that's where the Romanian game, the first game for me, they put 85 points on them. Maybe that's it. And maybe we're clutching at straws, and maybe it doesn't exist.
But there's, you're trying to balance different things here,
You
aren't
are.
you? Because you also want to create a momentum,
Which they did.
and they did, and a feel good in the camp, and you want to get game time for your key players, some of them who were
Sexton had to
injured.
play.
Sexton hadn't played. So, there is a balance, and I'm not sure there is a perfect way to do this. There's not, and because if there's a foolproof way of winning a World Cup, everyone would be following it. And listen, I thought we had done ticks, and I'm spoken about this ad nauseum every time we're on here. I'm speaking about the milestones that Ireland have hit. So to have done all those things in a World Cup year. They've done the preparation. They've done what you needed to give yourself a chance to win the World Cup, I think. And then I think they had to focus on getting out of that group. And maybe that's another hangover from never getting beyond the quarterfinals, because the idea of not getting out of that group was the group of death, and Scotland are resurgent and South Africa are the world champions. That was barely even think about it. And you're thinking, well, what happens if we don't get the bonus point? And as it happened to me in the World Cup in 2007, we had a terrible result first time out. We got a bonus point. We played Georgia, didn't get a bonus point, nearly got beaten. And then, we lost against France, and then you're out.
Yeah.
So I can understand, until Ireland are a little bit more comfortable in their own skin, I can understand why they did what they did. And I ultimately don't think it impacted this performance from a fatigue perspective. I think two things affected this performance most. It was, I think the performance of New Zealand, which was, I think, exceptional. And it hit Ireland in the areas that they need to go well in, and ruck time was one of them.
Yeah.
And then second, there was no doubt there was a constriction of Ireland's gameplay. And when it's Sexton taken into the line, or that first pod taken to the line, they didn't do it as efficiently as they had, as we've seen many, many times.
I will play the devil's advocate.
Last point,
New Zealand
yeah.
rested a lot of their players
Yeah.
all the way through. But
They did.
Look, I get your point, and you're right.
They had an easier group.
But for whatever reason, they do have to look and say, why was that performance today sub-maximal? Because as Robbie said, they had to play, in the high 90s to win that game. They didn't. They were full of courage and full of effort, and they came back and they were beaten 4 times and got up. But they were sub-maximal.
The point stands. Okay, fellas.